Can you please state your name, your birthday, and how long you've lived in Hernando County?
My name is Beverly Traub. I came to this area in 1957, which makes this 57 years ago. And my birthday is June 24th, 1928.
And what part of the county did you come to when you moved here?
When we moved here, we came right to Ridge Manor because my husband had promised a job in construction when Ridge Manor first started.
Can you describe what Ridge Manor was like when you first moved here?
When I first moved here, there were the developer and his family and probably 10 or 12 other houses. Mostly they were people involved in the sales of Ridge Manor property because it was all broken into lots at that time. And my husband was involved in the construction along with a couple of the other families.
What was it like back then? What sorts of memories do you have that sort of differentiate that time period of your earliest, your earliest time spent here from how it is today?
Back in the 50s and 60s, of course, there were very few people, but there were people with children. And so the school bus was really a trip because all schools were in Brooksville. And we didn't have any kindergarten, so from grade 1 through 12, they all rode the same buses. And nothing, Hillendale was there, so there were some children in that subdivision and a few of the other old timers along the way. But one bus would pick up all the students for grades 1 through 12 going into Brooksville.
Are there schools in Ridge Manor?
Well, there's a private school at the Baptist church.
And that's it. So the kids essentially are still having to go to Brooksville.
Oh, yes.
To go to school at this point.
Exactly.
Even now.
Even now, right. Yeah, it's the buses go through here several times a day. Everybody was so close that they built a small community of family-like. And if you needed anything, you just went and found somebody who had it. And as the area did grow quite rapidly because the developer did do a lot of advertising up north. And so homes were being built. And you're going to ask me about old-time favorites. And some of the favorites that we had was that the lake here was part of the property, and therefore it was open to anybody that wanted to come. And the kids would swim in it and so forth. The men mostly established the Kiwanis Club back then, and they sponsored a lot of the activities for the kids. We had big 4th of July picnics at what we called the marina because they had built a dock out here that went into the lake. But later in the year, of course, they would have things for Christmas and for Easter. And the Kiwanis Club was who sponsored all of that.
Now, was the Kiwanis Club related to the Kiwanis Club in Brooksville, or was it Ridge Manor's own Kiwanis?
It was its own. They were, of course, all under the same grouping, but they were independent. The other activities back then, again, there were few, but they had bowling league for the men, and they went into Brooksville at the time, and it's just stuff like that. And there were no parks here at all, so kids made their own parks and whatever.
What sorts of activities would the kids do? Do you remember?
Well, it depends upon some of course would be involved with. We didn't have any Boy Scouts or anything like that. Mostly just family activities.
Were there any other community organizations that?
I would say that the churches began to come in. And the first actual church that was here was organized, and they met up in what is now the golf course building, the country club building. And then pretty soon we had the Catholics and the Methodists built their church, and eventually the Baptists built theirs. So I would say the churches had a lot of influence on some of the activities, the dinners and things of that nature.
And did most of the residents attend church? And was that a commonplace practice at that point?
That was, yes. Well, I would say most of them did. And some of them, of course, who were of different denominations would go into Brooksville or Dade City until their churches were established here. The water supply was established by, I call them neighborhood wells. They would put a well in a certain area, and then they would feed the lines from that well to the surrounding houses. And that was one thing that was different.
That was, I guess Ridge Manor was completely independent from Brooksville then.
Oh, yes.
And that was the sense in the community that it was a completely different area.
Different area. One of, or a couple of things that really bothered people about that was even our telephone numbers are all still Dade City numbers. And our mail is still Dade City mail. So it appeared that anything other than the locals would think of everything this side of the river as being different. To call Brooksville at that time was long distance.
And what year was this?
Probably up into the 60s.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even the 70s before they stopped charging.
And you said 50 was a dirt road. I understand it was a 2-lane road.
Right.
It still is in this area.
Well, actually, this is Highway 50 here. And over about a quarter of a mile, I'm going to say, is Old 50. And it's now called Ridge Manor Boulevard.
Okay, and that was Old 50?
That was before the highway was improved.
Was that the only main road going through Ridge Manor? I mean, was that the road that led to where you needed to go?
That was, yeah, that was the only road going east and west for a mile. Speaking of that, that helped the Ridge Manor to grow considerably because Orlando was beginning to really grow. And the only way that traffic from Tampa, Clearwater, St. Petersburg, and all points over that way, to get to Orlando from there, they had to come up either Highway 19, 41, or 301, and go across Highway 50 because of the Green Swamp. And so we had at one time 3 service stations on the corner of 31 and 50 because of the traffic that was in there.
Wow.
And of course, the other memory of that intersection, there was no traffic light there.
Oh, wow.
And so we had lots of accidents. And somebody in the state road department had the great idea one time to change the stop signs from Highway 50 to Highway 301.
Oh.
Mass confusion, mass accidents too. And so they.
Do you know when they put that light in that's there now?
Probably not until at least the 70s or 80s.
Oh, wow. So it was quite a while.
They finally put rumble strips into the pavement, which did a lot of good.
How would a person shop for their, daily needs?
For the Dade City or Brooksville.
Really? So there was no Winn-Dixie?
No, my husband and I started probably in the mid-60s with a small general store.
You owned one? Oh, wow.
And we got to know people in the outlying area.
What was school like when you moved here in the 50s?
I started substitute teaching first, and a personal problem I had was that we only had one vehicle. And if my husband needed the pickup truck, I had to find a way there. Fortunately, there was another man that was teaching over there, and I could catch a ride with him when I had to. So that was.
And which school did you go to substitute teach at?
Brooksville. I did some in Dade City, but mostly in Brooksville. Mm-hmm. And I started in the building that is now the Baptist Church Educational Building.
Okay. And what did you teach?
Well, substitute teaching, you did a lot of things, but mostly after I went out full time, I taught math. Well, I had my degree from when I was in Ohio. Okay. So I have my degree and I got certified here because I had a degree. When I started, of course, my minor was in social studies, so my first job was to replace a woman who was going on maternity leave. Another woman quit. She went to work for the library at the time, and I took her position at the school, and that was math. And math forever after. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you about driving to work back in the 50s and 60s. Highway 50 was a 2-lane road. There were a lot of orange groves in the area, which meant we had trucks hauling fruit on the road. And there was, like I said before, there was the only road, Highway 50 was the only road between the west coast and here. And we had a lot of lime rock trucks on the road. So going from my house to Brooksville every day could be very adventurous at times because it's hilly, as you know, and foggy. So it was quite adventurous some days because the trucks would get you between between them, and oh boy, and you couldn't pass. I mean, it was 2 lanes, hilly, yellow lines, and all that.
Right.
But we survived. But see, after I had taught for several years, the superintendent moved me into the administrative office, and I ended up in there for the last 10, 15 years.
How was doing administration? Because like, we know the county has expanded and expanded exponentially in the 60s, 70s, 80s. What were some of the changes that you saw from the administration point of view with the influx of people migrating essentially to Hernando County?
One thing for sure that is different is the superintendent was elected.
Okay.
And so that put a lot of involvement, countywide, because they voted countywide, so people were more involved in it then than I think they are now. And so, and the fact that all the schools were located in Brooksville brought people to town. And of course, with athletics and other activities, there was no bus transportation. Parents had to carpool or whatever to get them home after practice. Of course, the school system never had enough money because of the growth. We started West Side Elementary School, probably, what year was that? That was the first school on the west side of the county.
The West Side
West Side
Elementary.
Elementary was. And that has got to be probably either in the late 60s, early 70s.
And how well was that adjustment, let's say, of having expanded physically, mentally?
It just put more, more mileage on all the vehicles, all the deliveries and things. We just assumed that was it, and planned for it. We had a good team. I brag about the team that we had there because all of us, majority of us at least, had been teachers.
Oh, that had moved into administration, that had actually taught. Okay.
So we had pretty good knowledge of what had happened and what was going to happen. And so we planned for it. And of course, integration came into being.
What was the
Integration.
Integration, sure. Okay, so you were in administration when integration happened?
Right.
Oh, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. There were no black people on the west side of the county, and yet we had schools out there when that transpired. And so that was a big adjustment. But we worked it out, and of course, the federal government was very much involved. And so we had to fill out papers and document everything. And we actually started busing the special buses that took the black children from Brooksville to West Side Elementary School, and eventually Springstead and Western End. And we had to do teachers too. They had to have a certain number of teachers.
Oh, wow.
In the program. So that was all worked out.
Yeah.
We had our problems, of course, in the beginning, because it was pretty much of a segregation type thing previously. There were some objections to it.
Sure.
But fortunately, between the law enforcement and the parents that were involved and things, it did work.
It did work. Wow. That's good. Were there any major uproars?
A few.
Were there? Were there?
Sometimes, from what I heard, and this was hearsay, I understood there was a lot of resentment even in the black community.
Oh, really?
And that the very first year that we had that, it was called freedom of choice. And the ones who wanted to come were allowed to come. There was no forced transfers. And some of the football players and other athletes and stuff, they wanted to come to a bigger school so they would have more opportunity. And I was told many times that when they went home, they were ridiculed.
Oh, really? By their peers at home?
Right.
Wow, for choosing to integrate. That's an interesting perspective. Definitely.
We had no real problems in the schools because everybody was, just trying to make it work. And it did work, you know.
Yeah.
We had no major problems.
And do you have any specific memories of major events that happened in the Ridge Manor area over the course of past 57 years that,
Oh, well, I guess the biggest one was when Lonnie Coden got shot, the sheriff deputy. We had a sheriff substation in the building, and
the Ridge Manor Community Center?
no, one of the buildings up at the corner 301 and 50
Oh, okay.
had it. And then this convenience store was just across the street on the other corner. And one of the deputies that was in the substation, his wife was bringing his dinner to him. And she stopped at the convenience store to get something. And she knew something was going on because of the way these individuals were acting. So she got back in her car and came over to the substation and told her husband that there was something going on in there. Well, the other deputy that was in there with him got up and took off right away and went over to his car and went across the highway to there. And of course, he was the only one, 2 against 1. And they got him around the back of the building somehow and shot him with his own gun.
With his own gun.
Hmm.
Wow.
And they were still in jail waiting their death sentences.
Right now?
Mhm.
Wow.
I think they both have death, believe me, they both in prison. And but they had killed a woman and her baby over near, I think it was Leesburg, prior to coming this way.
So they were not Ridge Manor residents? They're just passing through?
Right.
And that type of activity was not common
No.
in Ridge Manor.
Oh, no.
So it was a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
But very, you know, even though we were scattered, the houses were all scattered, you could walk. I mean, people didn't lock their doors. You know, you walk. My husband and I walked a lot after work and stuff, and we could just go anywhere and not have a care that there's any menacing things waiting for us.
Right. How was life in Ridge Manor before air conditioning?
We had a lot of fans. And actually, you know, people just left their houses open during the day. They didn't necessarily lock them up at all. And so, the fresh air could blow in, or sometimes the air was hot. So you weren't cooling very much, but they had a lot of fans and things. And the same thing was true when I taught school there. The first year I was kind of lucky in that I was teaching in the old building and had a second floor. And I was able to catch a lot of the air, but we all had a fan, at least one fan, maybe you're lucky 2 fans. And even in summer school, after we moved from that building down to the foot of the hill, there was still no air conditioning. And as I say, I was lucky to have 2 fans because some of the rooms weren't being utilized, so we kind of moved the fans around. And but it was the same for everybody, so there was no. Well, of course, if someone took your fan, there was a little animosity, but everybody, you dressed differently. When I did the summer school bit, and the other teachers too, you wore cotton. You didn't wear nylon or any of the new fabrics. You wore more cotton, and we had to still dress professionally, so we made the adjustment and we survived it.
Do you remember getting air conditioning?
Yeah. One of my favorite memories of that was we had in the summer school we were done early, so we'd all go to lunch together. And this one woman whose husband had his own business, well, they had a new car, and that car had an air conditioner. And so we all fought to go to lunch with her because our cars were sitting out in the sun, and of course you had to roll the windows up because of the rain. Right, it could come at any time in summer. And so you get in your car, you open all the windows up. So we get in Pat's car and we go with her to lunch.
All the teachers, summer school teachers?
Yeah, well, it's pretty easy. We could get in.
Can you remember any catastrophic or not, but just hurricanes or any acts of nature that made an impact on Ridge Manor?
But we had hurricanes, but we were very, very fortunate. Now I'm confused with the names of the hurricanes. But back in the 60s, I believe it was, there was a hurricane coming up from the southwest, just like the last Charlie. It was doing the same thing as Charlie was doing this time. Came right up through the middle part of the state, and according to radio, it was going to follow Highway 301 up through here. And so both my husband and I were fairly young, and there were some older people in the area, so we were going to stay up there all night and be on call. Well, there was no action. Of course, we both fell asleep. But that one went through Orlando, same as Charlie did, went through Orlando, and we got some rain. The only thing we got out of it was a few downed trees that took out some power lines. We had a rainy season, real rainy spring season with lots and lots of rain. And the river flooded so badly, we didn't have any control at that time. So the river flooded really badly. And in order to stop some of the water from coming in, some of the men went down to the river where there was a cut and it was letting the water come this way. And they built an earthen dam. Took them about one night and day to maintain it because it was just strictly sand, just to block the water from flowing north and made it go in its regular channel. And that was quite an ordeal. And of course, it did save a lot. We only had one or two houses that got water in them.
Wow, and what time period was that?
It was probably in the 60s. Okay. And consequently, after that occurrence, and I'm not quite sure who to give credit for, but anyway, there was a regular dam put in there.
Oh, wow.
And the dam was well maintained by volunteers who made sure, the gears were oiled and all that sort of case. Well, over a period of time, of course, things did deteriorate. So they've just rebuilt it in the last couple of years with with Swift Mud and whoever else was involved. And so now if there's a catastrophic flood like that, they can control a little bit anyway. But because of that flood, and I'm sure Elaine or someone told you about this, millions of chickens were killed in Missouri town from pneumonia.
Wow. Because
the water got in. It was all north central, that doesn't make sense. Central part of the west side of the state that got swamped. Mm-hmm. We had 3 days of nonstop rain on the top of the rainy season. And those Missouri town at that time was the #1 egg producer, I don't know, in the United States or the world or something. And so the water got into their coops, and the chickens got pneumonia, and they had to call in the National Guard to bury the chickens.
Wow.
And so they got it a lot.
How have you seen Hernando County change?
You would think that any place would grow closer together. But I think because of the way it grew, it divided the county more so.
And what exactly do you mean by that?
The money was taken to build roads, schools, and all the other facilities that go with that water treatment and everything. All that money was being poured into the west side of the county. And I think there's a little resentment.
Where do you see Hernando County going from here?
It's still divided. We out here don't really have much participation or its attention by the county.
If you could describe Rich Manor to someone who's never been here, if someone asked you where you're from and you're visiting elsewhere, how would you describe Rich Manor?
Well, first of all, geographically, we're 45 miles from Tampa and 50 miles from Orlando. So geographically, and then it's a loosely knit community that has very few problems, and it's a mixture of people and ethnic groups as well, and but you have to drive to get anywhere. The Ridge Manor is unique for the county, I would say that. And we've survived all the years. There's still a lot of empty land yet. Some streets are just completely built out.
Right. What do you think drove people to live in this area of the county if they had to travel to get to work or to shop? I mean, why would you live in Rich Manor?
I think there was a more open freedom about it. And, there were building restrictions, of course, but yet you had more room, larger piece of land to put it on and stuff like that. And a lot of people like that.
Yeah.